Ladies and gentlemen, now making his way to the news desk. What do we call this? Set?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a set of sorts.
Brandon Sutton from the podcast The Discourse.
Yes, the creator and showrunner of The Discourse.
Oh, is that right?
I made it myself, yeah.
The executive producer?
Executive producer. I get all the credits, I have some help. But
Proprietor?
It's incorporated. Well, it's incorporated in the Virgin Islands, but...
Right, of course.
Of course.
Did you actually do that?
No. I didn't pay taxes.
Why bother when you're just on the lam anyways?
Exactly.
So, Brandon, let's just start with the impeachment, and then we'll get into 2020. We should also maybe... I just want to, I think there's a big story, so I want to just top line this, and we don't even have to go into it per se. But the Trump administration is quietly using this time to block grant Medicaid. And this is the part of the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare. And for people to understand what this means, it basically means that all you're doing is outsourcing the cuts to Medicaid to states, specifically Republican-controlled states. They get a big chunk of money. How they deal with it in terms of certain numbers of Medicaid, people on Medicaid in their states is up to them. They can add new restrictions on Medicaid. They can add all sorts of other things. They can divert a lot of these fundings to... we gave tax cuts to wealthy people. Let's shore up our highway funding mechanism, whatever. It is, it's arguably illegal under the way that the Congress did it, but we'll see. But this is going to get no attention over the next couple of weeks.
A lot's going on, so it's understandable that it won't get a lot of attention in the media and the news. But from a personal standpoint, I find it frustrating that whenever we make these gains under the Democratic establishment, under a Democratic president, there is this implication that they're going to be rolled back, in some way once Republican gets into office. We seem to exist in this cycle of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 2 steps back, sometimes 3 steps back, and it's hard to, at least in the past 30 or 40 years, think of a particular instance of civil rights or the expansion of social services. This is not the case, though. Whether it's Roe v. Wade or the Voting Rights Act or Obamacare, right? We can't seem to get any momentum to move forward. It's always just a give and take. That's kind of just built into the system, I think, a little bit.
Some of it's built into the system. Something like the Voting Rights Act, that's just that's just a function of the Supreme Court. It had been re-ratified by a Republican Senate in 2007. And the court basically said they only did that because they were afraid of black people, essentially, and didn't want blowback, and it shouldn't have been. But things like, frankly, Obamacare, they were not able to roll it back, but they've been able to undercut it significantly because of, and Dodd-Frank also occurs to me on the same way. And there was a similar argument on both of those from the left, which is you need to do more structural wholesale changes. The argument about Dodd-Frank was at the time, and it was most articulated, I think the best by the working group coming out of Occupy Wall Street, frankly, which was you need to take a meat cleaver to the policy here. Forget sort of trying to be intricate and do surgical changes that are going to maintain some markets and not others, and put restrictions on some markets and not others in terms of the financial markets. And you don't want to stifle innovation over in this small sector here, et cetera, et cetera. That's ostensibly what the argument was. It was probably just to keep the doors open. But the other argument was, we're just going to separate commercial banks and investment banks and be done with it. And if we lose a couple of digits when we take off the gangrene, then that's what's going to happen because we've stopped the gangrene.
Obamacare, just to go back to Obamacare specifically, Obamacare is so weird now from in my perspective, because from when I remember when it was getting passed, it felt like a pathway to some form of universal health care, right? Obviously, single payer was on the table prior to it being passed. That was kind of torpedoed by conflicting special interest groups and Lieberman, et cetera. But
single payer was never on public options.
Public options on the table. But now it seems like the narrative seems to have transitioned from, okay, this is a transitory state we're going to go into, to, well, we have to focus all of our attention on preserving Obamacare specifically, right? I mean, I know there's disagreement over how far it went, but it was undeniably very weak, and it should have just been a step towards universal healthcare, which we're working on right now, right? Medicare for all. But it feels, and maybe it's me being conspiratorial, it feels like there is an affection or a fetishization of Obamacare specifically because it has Obama's name on it that precludes the fact that it's just a tool to get people covered universally, right? I think that the Democratic Party keeps indexing Obama. You spoke about this a little bit earlier, because he's a very popular president in a way that Clinton is not so much anymore. And Obamacare specifically is one of the things that you can point to in the past 20, 30 years that made a meaningful impact on a lot of people's life. And it feels as though because of a lack of ideas or a lack of a large book of those things that have been being pushed through in the past 20 years, they are overly invested in Obamacare specifically as their little baby. And it's supposed to, okay, we need to build, we need to build on this. It's something we need to build on, or not even build on, hey, it's not the most important aspect, right? The specific Obamacare versus the goal of Obamacare.
Well, I think had they kept, I think at one point Obama made a conscious decision to embrace the term, Obamacare. Initially, it was a way to generate hostility towards it, and then at one point they made a conscious effort to accept that branding. I've always said that they oversold the first part of it, which is the ACA part, right? Which is the Affordable Care Act, as opposed to I think it was actually, the actual name was PPI ACA, Patient Protection Bill. And the patient protections, we all now take for granted. No rescission, no lifetime caps, no yearly caps, no pre-existing conditions. All the patient protections were quite good because those are the only things in the Affordable Care Act that actually implicated everybody. Those are the only parts about it.
Real pills that the industry had to swallow too. Because they don't care about Medicaid expansion particularly because they don't want to cover people in those categories.
Correct.
Anyways.
Yeah, but it doesn't have Obama
and then the
in
idea
name.
of forcing people into a market with subsidies is pretty desirable. So the idea.
Well, they got the trade-off was.
Yeah, but patient protections was the one that's the one area of Obamacare where it was as an industry they took a loss.
The trade-off was we're going to give you an extra 10 to 25 million new patients, new customers. We're going to subsidize it. So you're going to get them at full price. Yep. They're not going to pay full price, but we as a government will make sure that you're getting paid full price.
That's a big win.
But on the other side is you can't kick people off your health insurance. And so it was this, what people want to keep is a structure. They want to be able to keep it where people have their employer attached healthcare, and they have that structure. And I have become more and more convinced that it really is about control of the workforce. They're afraid to take the control that providing health insurance provides off the table, because and this should have been obvious 2 decades ago, where people were complaining about every car that comes off of GM's lot, $2,300 of it is healthcare. And then you would imagine they would be the first in line to sort of say, let's offload this cost.
Can't put a price on labor control.
But they want it. But
just to add to that, it traps people in unhealthy environments, generally speaking, not just labor. How many people are still in relationships and unhealthy marriages specifically because, well, if they leave, they'll no longer have health insurance. They'll it's one of those things that, it seems not minor, but it's the layers to this are so, deep in terms of how it affects people's personal lives and, the toxic environments they force themselves into because you have to have health insurance. You have to have an ability to access healthcare, and leaving your job, leaving your husband, leaving your wife, leaving your parents. If you're let's say an underage trans youth, that has implications for your access to healthcare. And
right.
Yeah.
Well,